Tennessee Titans fans, we are here today with a clip from the Pat McAfee show. Everybody loves Pat, and he has talked about Tennessee Titans. There's going to be a lot of people talking about the Tennessee Titans because of the draft and having the number one pick. Title of this video is Titans Won't Pass on a Generational Talent with the number one pick. Open to moving on from Will Levis? Question mark. There were some comments made by Chad Brinker, the Vice President of Football Operations, that the Titans won't pass on a generational talent, and people are bursting at the seams to figure out what that meant. Let's hear what Pat has to say.
Everybody's talking about this Borgonzi quote and Brinker quote down there in Tennessee. Now, Borgonzi has been brought in as the general manager. Brinker,
you know that's how Pat's going to say his name forever. Borgonzi, that's how he's going to say it every time.
Is the president of football operation. Borgonzi is handling the draft and free agency. Brinker is the one that's going to cut it down to the final 53. They're very tight. They're on the same page. Brinker was on a local radio station with Ramon Foster and a few others, and this is what he had to say.
You ain't got to do Kayla Anderson like that. You ain't got to do Kayla like that.
About that number one overall pick that they have. Are you going to trade it, or are you going to utilize that pick that you have down there in Tennessee? Here's the president of football operations for the Tennessee Titans, Chad Brinker.
Yeah, we got to look at all the options. But the one thing I will say, if there's a generational talent, you don't pass that up. You can't pass that up. And if we feel that there's a generational talent right there, what we call a blue player, a guy that is a franchise-type player, the player that tips the field in your favor every time they step on the field, like you cannot pass that up. But we'll also look at all the options, not only at the number one overall pick, but in all the rounds. I mean, we got to see what the value is. We got to see what's on the table. We got to, do what's best for the Tennessee Titans and helping us build a football team that can sustain over time. And like
I think people, I've said this before, I think they're reading too much into what he said. I don't think he had any certain player in mind. Some people disagree with that. I don't think he had any certain player in mind when he said that. I think that's probably a general rule that just about every NFL franchise would say. If there's a generational guy on the board and we feel they're generational and we're on the clock, we're taking that guy. If there's a guy that we cannot pass on, we're not passing on him. And so they haven't even really gotten into the scouting or the, watching film and interviews and all. They haven't even really gotten into that yet. So I'm sure they don't know what they're going to do, but they're open to everything, is I think what he's saying.
I mean, I've emphasized how important the draft.
In 2023, Callahan was brought in last year. Now the GM, Borgonzi, out of Boston's been brought in, this year. So everybody's at different times. Allegedly, Borgonzi and Brinker are on the same page. They'll be the ones creating the roster. What's that mean for Callahan? We shall see. But a once-in-a-generation type player potentially at number one. Now, this has obviously sent ripple effects through it all, and we'll talk to Daniel Jeremiah in a second. Is that Travis Hunter is he talking about? Abdul Carter? Who's the once in
I will say this. I think it is surprising to a lot of people to hear that because in a lot of people's minds, they just assumed the Titans were going to draft a quarterback. Obviously, things didn't work out with Will, so clearly they're going to either draft Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, and I think people thought that was just a given. But hearing that statement, I think that's why people are running with it, because it's like, are Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward generational? Or is Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter generational?
Generation player that we're potentially missing or not thinking about, but there's a AFC South conversation taking place. Connor has a question for you.
Yeah, Lombo, Mike Borgonzi gets hired as the GM, and now a lot of stuff has come out. I believe the president of football operations, Brink, will have final say. Brinker, excuse me, will have final say on the 53-man roster, but then Borgonzi will be responsible for the free agents and the draft process. And then, of course, Brinker will report to Strunk. Not sure with Borgonzi. What does this say kind of about the Titans' whole operation? And then where does this kind of leave Callahan, just because he is the head coach? What is his role? Is he going to be involved, you think, with the draft or anything like that? Or is this kind of a three-headed monster in Tennessee now?
Well, you know how.
If it's a three-headed monster, that three-headed monster would be Brinker, Borgonzi, and Callahan. I get the vibe Amy Adams Strunk is completely removing herself from the situation. I mean, she wasn't even at the press conference for Mike Borgonzi the other day. I feel like Amy Adams Strunk is just saying, you guys fix it, and I'm going to be in my office.
How I feel about committees, and they've never dedicated a monument to one. So this sounds like a committee to me. Look, I think Brinker's been running the team. I think even when Rand Carthon was there, Brinker was kind of in charge of pretty much everything. So he's going to remain there. And obviously his background is got to have to find a way to utilize his skill set as a guy who can draft and develop a team. I think the real question comes into what kind of team do they want to have? They transitioned into a Cincinnati Bengal team, and it cost Rand Carthon his job, essentially. They got rid of the big power back. They went to nickel backs and Spears and Pollard, and so their offensive line couldn't run the ball, and they're counting on Will Levis.
What? That's all we could do is run the ball. What?
To be a good player. There's a lot of calculations that need to come true. For Tennessee to be good, they better make sure they're right about Will Levis, and that's Brinker's job to do because he was there when they drafted him. He's been a part of it, and I think that's ultimately going to be tied to what Callahan does. I think Cincinnati, if you copy their offensive program, you better be damn sure the quarterback's good because Burrow makes that thing go. It isn't the play design, it's the quarterback design and how he plays. So the Tennessee, in terms of all the moves they made in the past, they can blame them on Rand Carthon, but somebody else was signing off on him. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, and
I agree with that part, but so do they think the Titans are thinking about going with Levis again? Because I feel like that ship has sailed.
What do you think about Callahan, Chuck? What do you think about Callahan, the coach's position in this entire thing?
Yeah, anytime you can tell right now, like these coaches are coming in together with a GM. Anytime it's one of the other head coach in place, new GM, or vice versa, unless there's a prior relationship there, and just win, Callie. just win and win big.
Yeah, you win quick, too.
Been down that road.
Yeah, you have.
Been down that road.
GM comes in, not with you, new GM.
Lose a quarterback.
If there is a chopping block, Brian Callahan is going to be the first to go. If things go poorly next year and somebody's got to be the fall guy, the first guy in line is going to be Brian Callahan.
Yeah.
Don't have a Q, lost a few games, and that was that.
Lame duck, Chuck, is what they were saying.
Pat, we'll hear everybody's on the same page, but there's a difference between being on the what Coach is saying is so true. What you find is everybody's going to tell you in Tennessee they're on the same page until they lose a game. As being on the same page is meaningless. Being aligned is what matters most, and alignment can only come from the GM and the head coach being tied at the hip. Philosophically. Now, they're going to argue and go back and forth, but they got to see the game the same way. And this is where I think most teams make many mistakes. I mean, Brett Veach does an incredible job in Kansas City for Andy Reid, but he's tied to Andy Reid philosophically. They see the game the same way. And so that allows you to find players because, remember, scouting is not about finding. Scouting is about eliminating. And so you eliminate players you don't want. You don't find players. You eliminate the guys that don't fit. And when you're not on the same page, you argue about who you're eliminating.
I mean, it's a fair point. It is a fair point that, this is what I said about the teamwork makes the dream work thing the Titans are trying to do, where we're going to be a team and we're going to all come together to pick who we draft and free agents. That's all fine and good until it doesn't work. We heard it with Rand and Vrabel, collaboration. We're in lockstep. We're going to blah, 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 blah. Until it didn't work. And then it was, well, okay, this person wanted to do it this way, and then that person wanted to do it that way. Like you see Pat pointing the fingers, because if you start losing, okay, then that's when the snowball starts rolling downhill, and everybody starts saying, well, I wanted to draft this guy, but he wanted to draft that guy. I wanted to pick up that free agent. He wanted to go that direction. And then a whole bunch of finger pointing. So what they're saying about Callahan is true. You better start winning some games. You better start winning some games, and you better start doing it quickly, and you better get on board with Borgonzi. Whether he's got a little different view of how things should go than you probably need to adapt what you're doing to him. Because, like I said, Callahan, if things don't go well, you're going to be the first one on the chopping block.
And that becomes a rift within the building. Look, I think Tennessee went through it. They wanted a change to become Cincinnati's offense. I don't see how anybody can be Cincinnati's offense unless they bring Joe Burrow with them.
Yeah, and Joe Burrow obviously is a weapon, and we'll be excited to see what awards he wins, if he wins any awards at NFL Honors, up for Comeback Player of the Year, and I believe offense, whatever the case. Lame duck down there is such an interesting situation because you brought up Andy Reid and Brett Veach, how they're on the same page. And Brett Veach, and obviously the Chiefs front office, we have that here. Chris Ballard came in from the Chiefs front office. Andy Reid, supreme commander there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, and what Andy's so good
that's
at,
Andy Reid,
everybody thinks when you hear Supreme Commander that they want to do everything. No, Andy Reid gets everybody aligned. It's the most.
The difference is Andy Reid is Andy Reid. He's the best coach in the league. Brian Callahan just completed his first year as a head coach. So Brian Callahan, and by the time Andy Reid got to Kansas City, he already had a ton of credibility from his days in Philly. So, I mean, he went to a Super Bowl with the Eagles. Didn't win it, but they got there. So, Brian Callahan doesn't have that same aura as Andy Reid. Andy Reid and aura, two weird terms to put together. Brian Callahan can't come in and just do what Andy Reid does and be like, all right, here's what we're going to do. He just had his first year, and he went 3-14. So
it's what Bill Walsh did. Everybody was aligned. It's what Belichick does. Everybody has to think philosophically, this is where we're going. Doesn't mean we're not going to disagree on things, but we're going to be aligned on how we're going to get there.
There's seemingly no supreme commander in Tennessee, right?
No.
But
none.
Borgonzi said he and Brinker have great relationship and admiration for each other since 2009. Never worked together, but since 2009 they've had a lot of admiration for each other, right?
Yeah, just through the circles and doing what they do.
But this one has free agency and draft. This one has final 53, and then this one's got to coach them all. Okay, that's a lot of people that have to get on the same page.
That's weird.
Good luck. I think it'll happen.
This whole notion about who has control of the 53 is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I mean, it's so stupid, right? You can only dress 46 players, right? And so what Ron Wolf did in Green Bay with Mike Holmgren is the smartest thing to do. He told Mike Holmgren, look, Mike, you got 50 players. You dress whoever you want. Joe Gibbs did the same thing with Bobby Beathard. But player 51 to the rest of the team, that's really for the personnel department to decide on who's got a future. So we can develop talent, but you're not going to hurt your roster currently. Like, I control the 53. I mean, seriously, that's just a power grab. I mean, those 7 guys can't dress anyway.
All right. Sounds like it's going to go great down there.
Yeah.
Borgonzi is from
Everett.
There's skepticism, baby. There's already skepticism. And I get, like, this was one of our big complaints with the firing of Rand and promoting Brinker to vice president of football operations and telling us pretty much that he had been in charge and that he's going to be in charge. But then you have Borgonzi who comes in and says, I'm picking who we draft. I'm picking who the free agents are. So who's if you guys get in the draft room and Brinker wants to draft Cam Ward and Borgonzi wants to draft Abdul Carter, who we drafting? Because, like, we could say you're going to disagree. Sure, you're going to disagree, but, like, I don't know. I mean, ultimately, you can laugh. You can say, oh, that's not going to work. I mean, Mike Borgonzi was pretty clear. This is kind of the way they do it in Kansas City, where it's just a group of people and they all have the same vision. That is where it's all going to have to come together. Everybody's got to have the same vision and the same idea of what we're going for. Everybody has got to get on the same page. This, like I said, this whole teamwork thing's a great concept if it works. If everybody can get on the same page and do what they need to do. But if you start 0-3, if you start 1-4, like you did this past year, Uh-oh. Who's going to take the fall?
Mass,
which is
great football town, a lot of history, a lot of great players have come out of Everett, Mass.
A lot of Italians, right? Over there?
Yeah,
a lot of
too many, some would say. But
Hey, see your shirt.
Some would say. I didn't say I did.
I just want to let you know. I heard Brinker talking to Ramon Foster and another local radio show down there. It said, if you have a once-in-a-generation talent, number one, you have to take that player. Blue player is what we call them. Like, once-in-a-generation, because they have the number 1 overall pick. But then also we'll listen to everything else. Who's he potentially talking about there? Is that Travis Hunter? Is that Abdul Carter? And whenever it comes to quarterbacks, everybody's still talking Shador and Cam Ward, really, are the only first-round grades? And how do you kind of see it all operating?
Yeah, for me, Abdul Carter is the best player in the draft. So when I heard that and just like blue player, an elite player, someone who's going to step in, be a Pro Bowler, like right out of the chute, that was what I heard. And to me, Travis Hunter is so unique in how you can use him and all the different things he can do. So that was at least perked me up a little bit that this might not just be, whether it's Cam Ward versus Shador, they have a need at quarterback. It's going to be one of those two guys. That perked me up a little bit to say maybe they're taking a long-range view and just taking the best player. To me, Abdul Carter at a premier position, I would argue the second most important position on the field. To have a guy at that level of a talent, I'd be all in on that.
And he played through an injury playing the Orange Bowl, which I respect and appreciate, too. So,
dominated.
Yeah, he's a dog. And Drew Rosenhaus said, I would have been disrespecting him and his family if I would have told him not to play for the good of business. So it feels like he...
Abdul Carter is a great player, ladies and gentlemen. I will say this, though, going back to the guy saying that, saying you're in control of the 53-man roster is a power grab. I would just say this, though. To act like that's, not a big deal to decide who makes the final 53, I don't know. Because whoever decided who made the final 53 last year, Rand Carthon, brought 5 tight ends to the main roster that we never elevated, most of them. So, and a bunch of our special teams guys we let go, like Hassan Haskins, who could have really helped us. So to say that the guy who picks the final 53 doesn't really matter, that's just a power grab. No, it matters. I disagree with that. But anyway, a lot to take in right there, a lot to digest. You can see the national media perspective. A lot of it is that the Titans still feel a little dysfunctional, a little chaotic. Who's really calling the shots here? That's a question that's going to rage on. Hopefully Brinker, Borgonzi, Callahan, everybody involved can calm those fears in the coming months. Tighten up, everybody.